Today and Across the Fence, policies, practices, and the shifting economics of dairy farming. We'll talk with an advocacy group helping Vermont dairy farmers in the Milk House and in the State House. Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. Let's start with a number, $2.2 billion. That's how much dairy farming contributes to Vermont's economy. As impressive as that number is, dairy farmers in Vermont continue to have more doubts than assurances, which makes dairy farming far from a cash cow. The Vermont Dairy Producers Alliance works to build Vermont's dairy industry through promotion, regulatory development, and economic sustainability. I'd like to welcome Amanda St. Pierre. She's the executive director of the Vermont Dairy Producers Alliance. She and her family farm at Pleasant Valley Farms and Fuels in Richford. Bill Rowell is a board member of the VDPA. He and his family run Green Mountain Dairy Farm in Sheldon. The Rowells were recognized as Vermont Dairy Farm of the Year in 2008. Welcome. Thanks for coming in today.
Thank you.
Now, Amanda, let's start out talking about the mission of the Vermont Dairy Producers Alliance.
The Dairy Producers Alliance is formed to advocate on behalf of the dairy farming industry and really help craft our story and inform Vermonters of what we're doing. But we also want to develop regulation and long-term policy that is sustainable. And that's really the mission of our group.
And so, Bill, who does the Alliance represent?
It represents the Vermont dairy farmer and its partners.
Mm-hmm. And can you give me some of the example of what other partners are involved?
The partners would be the infrastructure, the grain dealers, the veterinarians, those folks that rely on a healthy dairy economy.
Mm-hmm. Does it matter what size farm you have?
It doesn't matter at all. Yeah.
Talk a little bit about the challenges with Vermont's dairy industry, and let's start with the environment.
So there are a lot of challenges, obviously, and one of the challenges is I think Vermonters do not realize the changes that we've implemented for probably the last 20 years as agriculture has changed and the good things that we do each day. But more recently, with the passing of the RAP's required ag practices, it does present challenges to some of the smaller farmers that may not have been in this kind of regulatory arena. So there are challenges as far as implementing those new changes. And, you know, one of the big things we're talking about right now are, you know, cover cropping and protecting like erodible lands, that kind of thing. Also developing more buffers. And it's the understanding for some of these farms are, you know, what they need to do to avoid any kind of an issue with the ag agency or any other entity.
Is one of the challenges just the fact that every farm is different?
Every farm is very different. It is a big challenge, and where we're located presents a challenge. The weather patterns present a challenge. Certainly the economics of the dairy industry presents a challenge, because while a lot of farmers want to do the right thing and they want to understand the new policies and procedures and implementations, it's finding a way to fund those and to get the work done in a timely manner.
And we talked a little bit about cover cropping. How much, Bill, is it changing minds over changing practices?
Well, the practices are easy enough if you can try them for a year or two and see if they work. But changing the minds sometimes takes longer than a couple of years. Another challenge that we have is for the documented facts of what we do. For some of the smaller farms, that you have to create a bureaucracy to do that. I mean, if the state comes along and says, okay, we mandate this and you're a municipality, you have a bureaucracy in place. If they do that to a farm that's a small farm, they don't have the talent available or the labor available, I should say. And they have to create that. It's an expense. It's something of a burden.
And so how does the Alliance help with that?
Through education. You talk to people, you try to negotiate maybe something more reasonable for a procedure with the Agency of Agriculture or with the legislative body, that sort of measure.
You know, we talked a little bit about some challenges that farmers are facing. Maybe talk a little bit about how, I think start off with how milk is priced, because that's something that's very complicated and hard for folks to wrap their minds around.
Yeah, so it's complicated for the farmer to understand as well. And our price is really generated now on a world market, which is something that I think consumers and Vermonters aren't always aware of. And, yes, we have to look at our, region of what we're producing here, but really the price comes more from the world market these days, and it's set by a federal order. It's not the kind of industry where, we're not covering our expenses, so we're going to increase the cost of our product and cover, so we'll keep our margin. Unfortunately, in the dairy industry, we don't have that option. So the price we get paid is the price we get paid, and we have to make the best of it. Unfortunately, when we're being paid a price that's well over our cost of production, or well under our cost of production, it doesn't allow for anything extra, and even sometimes our cost of living is extremely affected, especially on small farms. They're barely scraping by to feed their families, and yet they're producing a great product that feeds the world, and consumers enjoy and appreciate. But the pricing system has been a big struggle in how we can kind of alleviate these ups and downs and volatile times.
We talked about some regulations from the state. Bill, how important is it for farmers to have a voice when it comes to dealing with lawmakers?
Well, weather's probably our biggest challenge, but in that environment, but politics, that's a different climate, and that's a big problem for us. And when you have people that don't fully understand what the problems that we face are, and you have them trying to regulate a solution, and you have to follow them down a road that maybe you don't want to be on because you're apprehensive about the outcome, you have to have somebody that's willing to discuss that with them, negotiate or compromise to come out to a better situation, to be on a better path. We don't necessarily have the money to spend on frivolous things, but we do have money to spend on necessary things. And we only have money to spend it once. So we want to make sure we get the best bang for our buck, and that our membership gets the best bang for their buck.
And so that's one of the things the Alliance does, is to work with the legislature.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
With the legislature and with the Agency of Agriculture and the Agency of Natural Resources also.
To give farmers a voice.
Yes.
Because in the past, that wasn't in existence, really.
No, I think everybody spoke for the farmer except the farmer, and finally the farmer's beginning to wake up and say, listen, there are less of us. We better do something before there are none of us, and we better represent ourselves. So that's the effort, represent the farmer and the industry partners.
One of the things that we talk about on this program is farm transfers. Is this issue perhaps a huge challenge facing the dairy industry, would you say?
So it is a challenge. We have an aging population, and in the farming industry, it is an aging population as well. And it's really matching up farms with potential new owners. And some of us have family members wanting to come back. I have two sons that are going to be coming back to the farm. They've just completed some college training, and my youngest is still in college. And their goal is to come back to the farm. But with the economic challenges that we all face, sometimes it's a matter of, is this the best decision? And other times it's faced, how do we economically transfer this over with the debt load and different things? And then the other part of the challenge is there are farmers who would like to retire, but there's no one in their family ready to take that on or wanting to. And so I would like to see Vermont come up with a better recruitment kind of program, as other states are doing, where they can bring in interested farmers from around the country that might want to set up in Vermont and keep our industry a thriving industry.
Bill, what would you say to that?
I agree with that. But you have to have somebody that really has a passion to be a farmer before you go down that road. And there are people that would like to do that, and there are some people that don't qualify because they don't have the real interest. So if you first determine the level of interest and then put the effort into structuring it so that can happen. But we are getting on in years as an agricultural community. I think our median age now is 59.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So something needs to change soon. But I agree with what Amanda has said.
Now, farming is technologically heavy. It's simple things like cell service can be a challenge. What are some of the solutions you think for farmers when it comes to that?
Well, we actually had some great discussion in Montpelier this last session talking about that. And, there's been a lot of initiative. Bill and I have been talking about this on the federal and state level over many years to increase cell phone service. And certainly all Vermonters would be excited. But for us, it really limits the type of agriculture we can practice. There is something called precision agriculture, which actually your cell phone service is in the tractor, and it can really monitor everything you're doing and field specific. And that's great technology that could really improve our industry. But you have to have the service dependable and obviously the funds to implement it. But I think the goal for Vermont is to move down that path because they're only developing more and more technology, and it's being used around the country and around the world, and it's putting Vermont at a disadvantage that we can't use that type of practice. So I think you'll see a push in the coming years to really try to get that completed.
Let me give you an example. On our farm, we put a digester on the farm. That was a $2.75 million project. And then the idea was to use a drag line to spread the manure, to inject manure. That was a $350,000 machine if you had the big tractor. So we do that, but now you can't send the signal to the drag line to tell it to stop pumping or start pumping if you don't have a good cell phone signal. Something that simple, holding everybody up from this nice technology to do the right thing, all because of a cell phone signal.
Right, and as everybody knows, time is money.
Time is money. It is.
And so we've talked about some challenges. What are you optimistic about in the farming community for dairy farmers in Vermont?
I'm really optimistic because I find in speaking to farmers, and we've been working on different things for many years now, most recently with the Vermont Dairy Producers Alliance, but the conversations I have with the farmers is that they still love what they do. They still have such a passion for their animals and their land and the industry. And I think that with passion, you can probably overcome a lot of things and a lot of challenges. So even though it's been tough going, the farmers that are here and their families are ones that just want to stay. And they're not doing it for monetary reasons. They're doing it because they love it so much. And I think that's why I'm optimistic. And as I see my children who want to come back to the farm and appreciate the values that you have on a dairy farm with 4-H and all these neat things that we did as a family, that to me is encouraging because, they're only going to do things better than we've done it. And, that's our goal is when we pass it on to them, we want to leave things better than when we first got it, as my parents did. And I think that's encouraging and it gives me optimism.
How about for you, Bill?
Well, we understand a lot more about agriculture today than we did when I was a boy in the 50s. And if you look at animal comfort today compared to then, it's vastly improved. And everything's about the cow today. And milk production has increased probably 3 times more than what it was when I was young. So those sorts of things are a big deal. Genomic testing in the animals to improve your herd. The nutrition is greatly improved over what it used to be. I mean, those are all things that people can be optimistic about. We know how to do agriculture pretty well in this country, whether you're growing grains or whether you're producing milk or what. It's something to participate in. If I was 24 years old, just getting out of graduate school, with a degree in animal science. Imagine that. With all the technology available today, the world is at your doorstep. It's quite a thing.
It is. Now, what can the general public do for Vermont dairy farmers?
I think it's just a willingness to listen to the stories that are being told as they're very genuine, and to appreciate that farming has evolved and changed, and we're only doing things better. I think sometimes because farmers are so busy, they don't tell their story and speak their truth, and so it's gotten lost sometimes. And so I think as a Vermonter, if Vermonters can just listen to those stories and recognize the improvements that are being made, and that farmers in general want to only get better, And the challenges that are presented, we'll overcome them, but maybe just be patient as we work to overcome them to get some of this new regulatory stuff implemented. It's going to take time. This problem did not happen overnight. And working together, it's good for Vermont. Working landscape, I think, is very important to Vermonters. And I think the dairy farmers are a big part of that.
And people should take advantage of opportunities. I mean, there are farm tours going on, breakfast on the farm, agritourism.
Absolutely.
Get to know your local farmer.
Yes, yeah, all good opportunities this summer. There's one coming up on the Audette farm in Bridport. There was one just recently in Montpelier at the Fairmont farm. And I think most farmers, if you would stop in and say, hey, do you mind if we take our grandchildren on a tour? I know I've got a lot of families coming back year after year with their grandkids, and we enjoy it. We love telling our story, and I think, just take the time. Meet your dairy farmer in your neighborhood.
Well, I want to thank you both for joining us today. If you'd like to learn more about the Vermont Dairy Producers Alliance, you can visit their website or you can call the number on your screen. It's 802-777-4794. That's our program for today. I'm Judy Simpson. I'll see you again next time on Across the Fence.